Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem. It was really a great pleasure to be here over Shabbos. I had a wonderful time. Thank you for your warm hospitality. I want to thank Mrs. Eisenberg for making all the arrangements and bringing me here. Thank you very much. And it's always really so nice to come back here to Squirrel Hill. As you know, my grandfather was a rabbi here for many, many decades. He lived on 3036 Beechwood Boulevard. Yesterday after the meal, we took a walk. My dear friend, he walked us all to 3036 Beechwood Boulevard, and the house is still there. And of course, I missed my grandparents, but I felt the kedusha of that location. And then we passed by where they lived on Beacon Street, across from the Koilal. So it's really very special to be back here. And in the closing shir, I'd like to share with you amazing highlights of Megillas Rus from the great commentary of the Malbim. And if you knew my grandparents, you knew my grandfather, I don't think, for certainly not a day of his life went by without him mentioning the Malbim. Probably not an hour of his life went by without him mentioning the Malbim. I just want to give you some introduction, what my grandfather's connection to the Malbim was. You know, my grandfather was born in the city of Lipna in Poland, near Warsaw. My grandmother came from Sakhachev. Her father was the last rabbi of the city of Sakhachev. They met in the DP camps after the war. And my grandfather did not know his father. My grandfather grew up as an orphan. His only memory of his father was, he remembers that his father's foot was sticking out from under the cover at his funeral. That was my grandfather's only memory of his father. But he was very connected with his grandfather. His grandfather was the rabbi in the city of Linschitz. Linschitz is a renowned city. Linschitz was the city of the Kliyakar. And the Malbim was chased out of many of his rabbinic posts from the Reform. And at one particular time, the Malbim ended up in the city of Linschitz as a regular citizen. So the Malbim would sit in the shul, where my great-great-grandfather was the rabbi of the city. He would sit in that shul, and he wrote the commentary of the Malbim there. And my great-great-grandfather became very good friends with the Malbim, very close with the Malbim. So the Malbim became, so to speak, like an adopted uncle in the Glatstein family. My grandfather would always say the Malbim is the most important commentary on the Tanakh. The Beis Halevi said there are psukim in Tanakh that no Mefarshim were ever able to explain on, let's say, on Tehillim. Only the Malbim was able to explain Baruch HaKodesh. The Briskers say there are three Achronim that have a status of a Rishon. There are three of the later authorities that have a status of the early authorities. Of course, they say Reb Chaim Brisker, you know. And they say the Vilna Gaon and the Malbim. Actually, I had a miraculous story that happened with the Malbim. On one of our Jewish heritage trips, we were in Ukraine, and I miscalculated, and the last day of the trip was my birthday. It was my 40th birthday, and I was like kicking myself, like, what do I need to be in Ukraine for my birthday? I mean, you go around there are people literally like walking out of taverns, you know, like you read in the comic books, you know. And like 2 hours before the end of the trip, the tour organizer said, you know, Rabbi Glatstein, they just discovered a new kever. Maybe you want to go there, because he knows that I'm always game for a good kever. And I said, what do you mean a new kever? He said, no, one of the great Achronim, they just found his kever. I said, who? We're in Kiev now. Who's buried in Kiev? It's like the Malbim. I said, the Malbim? Nobody knows where he was buried. By the way, when they buried the Malbim, they didn't make a matzeva because the Reform threatened to violate his body after they buried him. So they had to bury him. The Malbim was traveling from one city to the next. He died in a Gentile area. There was no Jewish cemetery there. And Rav Yisrael Salanter came to the funeral, and people were very despondent that the Malbim was passed away and was buried in a Gentile area. He wasn't buried in a Jewish cemetery. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said at the funeral of the Malbim that the same way Moshe Rabbeinu was buried in the Midbar, opposite those Jews who died at Baal Pa'ar, because ultimately Moshe Rabbeinu, as the faithful shepherd of the Jewish people, will elevate their souls and bring them to Gan Eden, the Malbim must be buried here for a certain reason. And you wouldn't believe it. Many, many decades after the Malbim was buried in Kiev, the spot where the Malbim was buried became the biggest Jewish cemetery in the history of the world. He's buried now in Babi Yar, where you have 100,000 Jews in the ravine right there. And now we understand why the Malbim had to be buried there. So with that introduction, I want to share with you some highlights on Megillas Rus. Megillas Rus, to me, every time I read the Megillah, it's very stirring to me. It's about the origins of the Davidic dynasty. By the way, my grandfather had a tradition. He came from Shevet Yehuda, from David HaMelech. So for our family, and by the way, probably so do you, because 80% of Ashkenazic Jews come from Rashi, and Rashi came straight from David HaMelech. You know, the Megillah opens up that Elimelech, who is the Gadol Hadar, who is the leader of the generation, so to speak, abandoned his people, left the land of Israel, went to the fields of Moab, and he was punished for that. The Rambam says that even though it's permitted to leave the land of Israel in famine, but it's not considered proper to do so, because you see what happened to Elimelech and his family. But the question is, so why did he do it? He was a great person, he was a righteous person. Why did he leave the land of Israel? And the Megillah tells us, Vayhi bimei shvaid hashoftim. It was in the time of the judging of the judges. And you know, our sages expound upon that. It was in a generation where the people judged the judges, meaning their leadership was weak. And when there's no leadership, society crumbles. You know, what do we say in Pirkei Avos? Have a mispalel b'shalom shel malchus. Pray for the welfare of the government. That's what they do, right? They made a Misha, I think in PZ, I heard they made a Misha Berach for the American government. You know, not every shul still does that, but there's a basis for that. And that is, without a strong government, society crumbles. And that's what happened in the times of Elimelech. You see, Elimelech was a wealthy man. There was no leadership. There were no shoftim. It was, so to speak, in an interim period between shofet and shofet. If you're a wealthy guy and the government is weak, and you have poor marauders just roaming the streets, then your estate and your property and your money is easy prey to the poor. And Elimelech could just not stick around. He was afraid to stick around. He was afraid that there would be no legal recourse if people would take advantage of his assets. So out of fear for his life and his possessions, the Megillah is opening up by explaining to us why Elimelech left the Jewish people. In other words, why he left the land of Israel and went to the fields of Maya. This offering of the Malbim, the following offering of the Malbim, is really a revolutionary offering. You know, we know that at a certain point of time, Naomi said to her two daughter-in-laws, you know, my dear daughter-in-laws, you married my sons Machlon and Kelyan, but they died. Go back to your nation, because they were from Moab. Go back to your people. Go back to your gods, because they were in the process of conversion. And I'm going to go to Israel, and you go to where you have to go to. I'll go where I have to go to. Just, you know, the relationship is not tenable anymore. And they said, why? She said, you know, because there are a lot of laws you're going to have to observe. You're going to have to keep Shabbos. You're going to have to keep the laws of Yichud. You're going to have to, you know, if you desecrate certain Jewish laws, you could be liable to a death penalty. You're not going to be able to be buried with other Jews. It might take your life. It's just not worth it. Go back to Moav. So Rus articulates the following very famous expression: Ba'asher tamusi amos. Where you die, I'm going to die. V'shamek kaver. Where you'll be buried, I'll be buried. Kayasa Hashem li. So may the Lord do to me. V'kayoisif. Ki hamaves. Yafrid. Beini uveinech. Only death will separate us. You ever hear the expression, until death do us part, right? This is where it comes from. Ki hamaves yafrid beini uveinech. Only death will separate us. That's the simple meaning of the pasuk. However, the Malbim revolutionizes the meaning of this pasuk. The Malbim interprets, it doesn't mean only death will separate us. You know, the simple reading is, Ki hamaves yafrid beini uveinech. That only death, I'll stick with you until we die. Listen to this offering of the Malbim. It's incredible. Says the Malbim, Rus was telling Nami, you know why I want to be a Jew? Because Nami's telling her, you don't have to be Jewish. We could still be friends. We could still be close. You could call me on the phone. You could write me letters. We could hang out together. We could go to the Milky Way together. We don't have to you don't have to come to the land of Israel. We could still be close with each other. And Ruth says, no, I got a problem. You know what my problem is? We could be close in this world, but death will separate us. Because if you're Jewish and you die, your soul will go under the throne of glory and will be eternalized in the world to come. But if I remain a Gentile and I am still an idolater, then when I die, my soul will go to the netherworld and we will be eternally separated from each other. Says Rus, you know why I want to be Jewish? Because I don't want death to separate us. I understand in this world we could be together. But if you're a God-fearing Jew, and I belong to the land of Mayav and the nation of Mayav, death will eternally separate from us. Says the Malbim, this is how we know that Ruth was a righteous convert. Because in this statement, she's articulating all the tenets of faith. She's articulating she believes in God. She's articulating she believes in the world to come. She's articulating that if you serve idols, you lose your share in the world to come. In this statement, that death will separate us, Ruth is articulating her belief in all the tenets of Judaism. Okay. Here's an amazing idea. In the Torah, in the Chumash, in the Nevi'im, in the Ksuvim, we have a word which we don't usually use in Pittsburgh or in the United States of America. Hine, or vihine. What does vihine mean? And behold. Okay, but what in the world does that mean? Like, let's say I say, V'hinei, and behold, I am here today in Poalei Tzedek. Did I say anything? What in the world does and behold mean? Very often we have in the Chumash the word behold. What does the word behold mean? Many commentaries explain that the word behold always denotes surprise. Here's the father of all of them. Vayihi ba'boiker, v'hinei Leah. It was the morning, and behold, the person next to him was Leah. Surprise. He didn't think that in the nighttime it was Leah. But vayihi ba'boiker, in the morning, v'hinei Leah. From here we learn the word v'hinei means surprise. So let's go to Megillas Rus, look at number 9. V'hinei vayaz ba mi beis lechem vayomer la'koitzerim Hashem imachem vayomer ulai yivarechecha Hashem. And behold, Boaz was coming from Beis Lechem. The Malbim wants to know, what's going on over here? And behold. So there are a few surprises here. One surprise is, the Chassam Sofer writes in Masechta Sukkah, Daf Lamed Vav, Boaz is in the field. I thought he's like a great rabbi. Don't rabbis need to be in the study hall? Don't they need to be in the Beis Medrash? What's he doing in the field? I mean, imagine if somebody say, where's Reb Chaim Kanievsky? Yeah, he's out on the farm today. I mean, if you had a question, where's Reb Chaim Kanievsky? He's where he always is. He's in the Beis Medrash. What's Boaz doing in the field? So Chassam Sofer writes, would you be troubled if you saw Boaz putting on tefillin and you say, why isn't he studying? Well, tefillin is a mitzvah. Would you be wondering why Boaz was sitting in a sukkah? It's a mitzvah. It's also a mitzvah to work the land of Israel. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. So he's in the field. So the surprise was that he wasn't where you would have expected him to be. But there's another surprise. You know what the surprise was? The Mishnah says in Brachas Daf Nun Daled, V'hiskinu sheyehei adam shayal eshloim chaveroi b'Hashem. The rabbis made a takana, they made an enactment. When you see your friend, you say the name of God. Shalom! See, this friend, he remembers my grandfather working in the Riverview, right? Yeah. So, Shalom is the name of God. When I greet you, I don't just say, what's up, was is nayis, what's flying, what's hanging. No, I say shalom. Shalom is the name of God. How am I allowed to invoke the name of God when I greet you? You're not to say God's name in vain. Who enacted this takana? Boaz. Why did he enact this takana? Actually, the Gemara brings an opinion that he enacted that you actually say Hashem's name when you greet someone. For example, Boaz says, Hashem imachem, may the Lord be with you. And they responded, Yivarechecha Hashem. Boaz made this takana. You know why Boaz made this takana? Because there was anarchy in the Jewish people. Remember, that's why Elimelech left in the first place. Because he was afraid as a wealthy man, the poor would abuse his assets and his money. There was anarchy in the Jewish people. And because there was anarchy, why was there anarchy? Because they had a mistaken notion that God is in the shul and God is in the Beis Medrash and God is present when you perform mitzvahs. But in terms of interpersonal relationships, then as they say, business is business. God is not present there. So Boaz needed to inject a certain element of sanctity and consciousness of the Almighty in interpersonal interactions. So therefore Boaz was masakein that when you greet your friend, you say hello, you don't just say, what's cooking? You say, shalom. You invoke the name of God. Because God is present when you meet your friend on the street, and He's present when you're conducting a business deal, and He's present when you're working. That was the great enactment of Boaz. And it was a surprise, because this was never allowed before. So the pasuk says, Vehine Boaz! Surprise! Boaz came, and he has a new enactment. You know what the new enactment was? Hashem imachem! God is with you! Vayoimru la yivarechecha Hashem. And they said to him, may the Lord bless you. Okay. Here's another great offering of the Malbim. Look at number 14. V'gam shayel tashaylula min hatzvasim v'azavtem v'likitav lo'isigaruva. Boaz sees there's this relative of his coming to the field. He understood that his destiny perhaps one day was to marry this woman. But he's sort of testing her. He had to make sure she wasn't coming and she wasn't interested in him for the money. Because if she's interested in him for the money, and she's from Moav, everyone's going to contest her conversion one day and say, no, she didn't do it sincerely. So Boaz promises her nothing. He offers her nothing. You know, the pasuk says, "Vayitzbat la kali." He sprinkled some parched grain in her hand, meaning, lady, here are a few pennies, and that's all I'm giving you. You know, if there was some kind of courtship here, you take a girl out on a date, and she's expecting you to take her to a fine restaurant, and you stick your fingers in the crumbs of the bagel, and you sprinkle in her hand, nothing. This ain't going anywhere. That's what he did to her. Vayitzbat la kali. He sprinkled some parched grain, but behind her back, he told the workers, "You drop a lot of bundles, because halacha is if you drop a bundle, the poor are allowed to keep it. It's shikha, yeah." So he told them, intentionally drop bundles so that she won't realize that we're feeding her without her thinking I'm interested in her. So that's what it means. V'gam shoyel tashaylula min hatzvasim. You drop, forget bundles forget grain from the bundles. So she'll think it's shikha, right? But here's the problem. There's a halachic problem here. Shikha, something that you pick up that somebody forgot, the poor are allowed to keep, and they don't have to give maser from that, because the halacha is shikha is pater from maser. But the problem was, this wasn't shikha. It was artificial shikha. They really didn't forget it. They were just giving it to her as a gift, but she didn't know that. So she's really chayiv to give maser, because it's not shikha. So he's causing her to stumble, because what that means is Ruth is going to pick up the bundles, take it home, give it to Naomi. Naomi's going to say, do we have to give meiser? Ruth is going to say, no, you don't have to give meiser. It's shikha, but it wasn't. So Boaz tells, va'azavtem, forsake it. make it hefker, make it ownerless. And if it's hefker, she's exempt from maser. So don't just forget it there, but on top of that, abandon it, render it ownerless, and then it's pater from maser. This one is a very powerful observation. This is an example of the Malbim's brilliant analysis of the tense and the character of the words that none of the other Mefarshim really describe. Listen to this. Look at number 16. V'atoymer Rus hamoyaviyah gam ki amare lahai im hanorim asher li tidbakin adim kilu eis kol hakotzir asher li. Rus, the Moabite, tells Naomi, he told me I should hang out with his Na'arim. Na'arim, are they boys or girls? Boys. What are we calling Rus? We're calling her Rus the Moabite. What? She converted already. We dropped that at the end of Parak Aleph. After Parak Aleph, she's just Rus. We don't call her the Moabite. Why are we calling her the Moabite? All of a sudden, in the end of chapter 2, Rus the Moabite said, he told me I should hang out with his Na'arim. Because he didn't tell her that. Take a look at number 17. Vayomer Boaz Rus haloi shamahat biti al telechi lilkoid b'sadeh acher v'gam lo yisavuri mizeh v'choi sidbakin imna roisai. Boaz tells Rus, don't go anywhere else. I don't want to see you going to anyone else's field. You're welcome here. You stay here, don't pass away from there, and you'll stick around with the young ladies here. You stick around with the young ladies. Boaz told Rus, stick with the young ladies. When Rus tells over to Naomi what Boaz told her, she says, he told me I'm very comfortable here and I have nothing to worry about because I could hang around with the young men. Now, Na'arim could mean men and women, but it also means men. Why did Rus deviate from what Boaz said? And the answer is, she wasn't paying such careful attention. Boaz says, you'll hang out with the young ladies. But because she was a convert, she didn't realize how specific he was when he said, you'll hang out with other women. She figured, what's the big difference whose association I hang out with? Because she wasn't experienced in the custom of the Jewish people that in a public setting, men and women are separate. So when Boaz said, you'll hang around with the young women, Rus took it lav dafka. She didn't really pay such close attention. And when she said it over to Naomi, she said, he told me to stick around with the youth. So the Megillah gives her a little critique. She's Rus the Moabite. She's still Rus the Moabite. She hasn't fully acclimated herself to the values of the Jewish people. That's how the Malbim interprets these psukim. Okay, now let's get a little Kabbalistic here. Because I could tell Sunday morning here, we're almost at the Yom Tov of Shavuos, and you're in a Kabbalistic mood. I just have that feeling. And especially because in 4.5 minutes, they're going to whisk me off because we got to make the flight. Okay. So, Naomi gives Rus very unusual advice. She says to him, look, you go down to the threshing floor, you lay down by his legs, you uncover them, and he's going to let you know what to do today. Adar ya, adar nisht. Whether he wants to marry you or he doesn't want to marry you. He's not going to drag this out. You know, like some guys, let's go out another time. Let's go out another time. I'm not sure. I have what to think about. I have to ask my Rebbe, to ask my friend. He's going to tell you today, yes or no. He's not going to drag this out. Now, the Mefarshim comment that why in the world is Naomi telling Ruth to act in this seemingly promiscuous, lewd manner, to go lie down next to Boaz and vigalis margaloisav, uncover his legs. Many Mikubalim write, look in the commentary of the Alshich, look in the commentary of Reb Shmuel di Uzida, that Ruth was actually the Gilgal of the oldest daughter of light. She was the reincarnate of the oldest daughter of light. The oldest daughter of light lived with her father thinking that the world was destroyed to perpetuate the world, and she lived with him for the sake of heaven, and she was rewarded because of that actually Mashiach came from the oldest daughter of light. However, there was still more to do. There was still rectification to achieve. Ruth came back to this world to seal the deal and repeat what the oldest daughter of light did with Boaz. Naomi knew that she needs to communicate to Boaz somehow that this woman is the oldest daughter of light, and the only way that she would be able to do that is to, so to speak, replicate what the oldest daughter of light did with him. Okay? That's just some background here. But I'm going to share with you what the Malbim teaches. What is the message of Vigilis Margaloisav, uncover his feet? You know, there's a process of the Levirate marriage, Yibum. Yibum means that if somebody dies without children, the brother needs to either marry the wife of the deceased. The brother of the deceased needs to marry the wife of the deceased, and if he doesn't want to marry her, they perform a procedure where she removes his shoe and she spits in his direction. Chalitza, it's called chalitza. What is the where does the shoe come in? What is the meaning of, if he doesn't want to marry her, she takes off his shoe, and we give him a name. You know what his name is? Beis Chalutz Hanal, the house of the removal of the shoe. Says the Malbim something really remarkable. The Malbim says that if you're a princess, it's going to be very hard to walk in mud because you're used to the finery of the palace. You're going to have to put on boots. So too in this world, our soul is royal, and our soul is uncomfortable in this world. There's nothing in this world that really makes the soul happy. A bagel doesn't make the soul happy. A steak doesn't make the soul happy. Physical pleasure doesn't make the soul happy. The soul is uncomfortable in this world. There's only one currency that's meaningful to the soul, the currency of Shamayim, spiritual pursuits. That's the only thing that gives happiness to the soul. So the soul needs a shoe in this world. You know what the shoe of the soul is? The body. The body is the shoe of the soul. Without the body, the soul cannot be here at all. The analogy is, if I were to ask you, where is your soul right now? You know, if you ask a Jew, where's your soul? They point to different parts of they're not exactly sure. Is it my eyes, in my head, in my heart? Your soul is primarily upstairs, currently. Your soul, your soul is mostly upstairs. It trickles down here into this world until the lowest part of your soul fits into your body like a foot fits into a shoe. The analogy of the body to the soul is a shoe to the body. You don't live in your shoe. There's only one person who lives in their shoe, the little old lady. Nobody else lives in their shoe. Everyone else, their shoe houses the lowest part of the body. So too, your body houses the lowest part of the soul. You know, sometimes people are walking down the street and they just have this premonition and they can't explain it. That's because you as an entity are situated mostly in the heavens currently. That's what we say, V'al nishmaisenu ha'pekuda islach, and our soul that are deposited by God now, not only when we go to sleep, now. But our soul comes down into this world, trickles into this world, and our body houses the soul. That is why when somebody goes to a holy spot, God always says, take off your shoes. It's an analogy. Take off your shoes means divest yourself of your connection to your body. This is a spiritual experience. Now, when a person dies without children, the soul of the deceased is at unrest, is so to speak, ringing in the almana, ringing in the widow, because he wanted to produce continuity in this world. And the deceased soul is asking, could somebody provide me with a shoe, with a body, to house the soul? Because there's an idea that a child produced through the Levirate marriage, so in other words, if the wife of the deceased marries the brother, the child is the deceased. The deceased is that child. The deceased comes back as that child. Where do we know that from? Megillas Rus. When Ruth had a baby, when Oved was born, what did everybody say? Yulad ben Lenami. Nami had a kid. What do you mean Nami didn't have a kid? Nami had a grandchild. Ruth had a kid. No. This is Machlein, back again. This is Machlein, back again. Machlein, in other words, the deceased comes back in the body of the child. Yulad ben Lenami. Nami had a kid. Boaz provided a shoe for Machlein. Therefore, Naomi, says the Malbim, tells Ruth, you're going to go down to the threshing floor. You're going to uncover his feet. The message is, are you going to leave Machlein without a shoe, or are you going to provide him a shoe? You're going to give Machlein a way to come back into this world, or are you not going to give away? That was the hint that Naomi tells Ruth, please do me a favor. We need to do this in a discreet manner. You can't explicitly say this. He's the Baal, you're the Isha, so you can't outright ask him, but you're going to allude to him. And the way you allude, you uncover his feet. This is the concept of Yibum, which is very interesting. That you know what the first parsha of Yibum in the Torah, one of them is you know, the first creation of the seeds of the Davidic dynasty begins in Parshas Vayeshev, right? We're in the middle of the parsha. Yehuda goes down, and his two kids get married, and the two children die, and Yehuda ends up marrying who? Tamar, and that relationship is called what? Yibum. And if you look at the first four words of Parshas Vayeshev, Yaakov be'eretz megurei, Rashi Tevois, Yibum. That is an offering of the tzaddik of Ranana, someone, a great Mekubal, who my grandfather was very close with. These are just a few teasers on Megillas Rus, just to open up our minds that there's so much depth and profundity beneath the surface of this Megillah that has how many psukim? 85 psukim. 85 psukim in Megillas Esther, in Megillas Rus. And this is really, by the way, every single pasuk in the Megillah begins with the letter Vav, except for 8 psukim that don't begin with the letter Vav. And they spell out an acrostic of the name of the Shlach HaKadosh, who is a descendant of Rus and a descendant of David HaMelech. The amount of secrets that lay beneath the surface of Megillas Rus is, we've only begun to scratch the surface. I really thank you very much for your kind hospitality. I wish you all Be'ez Hashem a Guten Chodesh coming up and a Chag Kosher V'Sameach. Thank you so much for hosting me. Bracha v'Hatzlacha. Thank you.